This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and it's our special pleasure today to have with us in the studio Sandy Hatley. Sandy is a graduate of Pfeiffer University and has a master's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in teaching. Is it education?
That is correct.
And Sandy then spent a good number of years in the teaching field in North Carolina. Sandy is from Stanley County, having been born and raised early on, I guess, in Seagrove.
That is correct.
That right? Okay.
Pottery capital.
Pottery capital of not just North Carolina, but the country, maybe the world.
Right. And I grew up next door to a pottery shop.
Well, welcome, Sandy.
Thank you very much. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be here.
To get us started, tell us a little bit more about your growing up years, your family, and how you got into music, because music obviously is a big part of your life, and we want to talk about that.
I grew up in a time when most of my friends were going to the beach on vacation, and my family would go to Nashville, and we would go to the Grand Ole Opry.
You went west instead of east.
That is correct. And we would go a lot of times to fiddlers conventions, which were band contests that would give prizes not only for the best band, but for individual instruments that were string or acoustic instruments like fiddles and banjos and guitars and mandolins. And when I was a teenager, I decided one day that I just didn't want to be a spectator anymore. I wanted to be a participant. So I asked my dad if I could take banjo lessons.
And as I understand it, there wasn't any particular music in your family history there.
No,
is that right?
I was the first, I think. My parents did not play, and my grandparents didn't play. But I was interested in it, and my father agreed to let me take banjo lessons. I don't think he really thought that I would stick with it, but he came in from driving the truck, and I had had a banjo lesson, and he was eating his supper, and I sat down, and I played him Cripple Creek on the banjo. And he cried. And I don't know if he cried because he was proud of me or because he knew now he was going to have to buy me an expensive banjo.
we're talking Gibson banjo.
That is correct. I had told him, I said, if I learn to play, will you buy me a Gibson? And he was like, sure. Because I don't think he thought it would happen. And it happened. And he bought me that Gibson, and I still have it today. And matter of fact, our middle daughter plays it.
You've got 3 daughters?
3 daughters. They're all musical. They all play. And I met my husband because of music, too. So we've got a lot of musical heritage there. And another thing I'll throw in is I learned to play in the early 70s. And that was pretty groundbreaking for me, being a female in a pretty much male-dominated field. Now there's a lot of bluegrass musicians. You have people like Rhonda Vincent and Alison Krauss and Sierra Hull and Molly Tuttle and Louise Zabranscom, and I could just name on and on. But back then, we were a very rare breed.
Are there any particular experiences that you can relate that indicate something about that uniqueness?
Oh yeah, I got lots of those.
Any G-rated?
Well, I can just say one time I was playing at a place where there was just an informal jam session, and I asked one of the gentlemen after I'd been there a while, I said, where's the restroom? And he was very uncomfortable, and he said, well, we generally just go out back. We don't have too many ladies. I said, yeah, that's not going to happen. So, but that's just one example of they weren't used to having ladies around.
You were a groundbreaking female banjo player.
I was. And then we had an all-girl bluegrass band when I was a teenager, and that was another groundbreaking thing. So we were able to get a lot of neat bookings because of our uniqueness.
Tell us more about the connection between your music and your meeting your husband.
Oh, well, I was playing in a band, and he played in a band, and we grew up 60 miles apart. And I would have probably never met him, but I was at a fiddlers convention, and they assigned...
Fiddlers convention, you mean a competition?
Yeah, band contest, where you competition. And they assigned you practice rooms, and we were at Mount Pleasant High School. And his band and my band were assigned the same room. And he was very cordial and friendly, and we got talking, and one thing led to another, and he asked me for my phone number. And it was funny, the first time he ever called me, when he did call, he said, "Hi, this is Gary Hatley. Do you remember me?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, he's going to ask me out." and I said, "Oh, sure, I remember you." And he said, "Do you know Harold Crisco, the instrument repairman?" And I was like, where's this going? I was like, yes, sir, I sure do. He said, well, my brother's needing frets on his banjo. If I bring it over there, could you take me over to Harold's? And I was like, sure. And I've picked at him since then. He said, hey, it was a pickup line, but it worked.
Now, Crisco, is that your maiden name?
It is.
So were you related to
I was not related to Harold, but he actually put an E on his Crisco, and we didn't.
I see.
Maybe somewhere far back down the line. But he always claimed me as his daughter because I played the banjo, and he worked on the instruments and played the banjo as well. And so he said I was his unofficial daughter.
Well, Sandy, I see that you've actually got your banjo here next to you. Could you do a little something
I
for
do.
us?
I could play you a little bit of the song that made my daddy cry.
Cripple Creek.
That's it.
Let's hear it.
Okie doke.
That was great, Sandy. Cripple Creek, was it?
It was.
Give us a little background on that song.
Okay, it was the very first song that I learned to play. It was the song that convinced my dad to buy me, instead of the Sears Silvertone banjo that I had, to get me a more expensive banjo, a Gibson banjo. It was also the song that I used when I was teaching elementary school. We did a chapel program on hee-haw, and I would play the banjo and stop, and a kid would stand up and tell a funny joke and then sit down, and I'd play a little bit more, and then another kid and we did a whole hee-haw skit based on that.
Do you know who wrote Cripple Creek?
You know, I don't. I don't. That's one of those traditional songs. It does have some words.
It's a classic bluegrass piece, isn't it?
It is.
I want to come back to your bluegrass background and your teaching here in just a little bit, but tell us about this first song that you've selected from Kenny Rogers.
It's called Love Lifted Me, and it has a portion of it that's the old hymn, but it also has some verses that speak about our love for one another. And my husband and I decided we wanted to have a bluegrass wedding since we met through bluegrass, and so we got married on Mara Mountain, and we had a bluegrass wedding, and this was a song that his family sang to me in the wedding, and it's very special for that reason.
Let's hear it. Love Lifted Me by Kenny Rogers.
I'll write myself a simple song, get the whole world to sing along. I'll call it a love song.
That was Love Lifted Me by Kenny Rogers. If you're just joining us, our guest today is Sandy Hatley. Sandy, you've been telling us about your music background. Tell us a little bit more about your teaching. You have your master's degree in education and spent a lot of years teaching.
Yes, I have. I've taught 30 years. I'm retired now, but I taught 30 years, and in that span, I was dual certified, both elementary and middle school, and at some point, I taught 1st through 8th grade, all of the grades.
Where did you teach?
I taught both in Asheboro City and Randolph County, and then I married and moved to Stanley County in 1984, and then I taught 27 years in Stanley County at Little Stanfield Elementary School. It was a pre-K through 8th grade community school.
Do you miss teaching?
I certainly miss the students. I don't miss a lot of the paperwork, the grading papers and fixing out lesson plans, but I do miss the students. We had a real good bond, and we did a lot of fun, memorable things that I will remember the rest of my life, and hopefully they will too.
Speaking of remembering things, you were telling me before we came into the studio about occasions when you've actually run into some of your past students and they relate some of those memories.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I was a big advocate for field trips when I was in school, and luckily I had principals who supported me in that, and I was also a big advocate for agriculture. So many of our families are several generations removed from the farm now, and children just don't know where their food comes from. And so I would take fall and spring farm tours of our area. And we would go in the fall, we would go grind corn and come back and make cornbread. And in the spring, we would go pick strawberries and come back and make strawberry jam. And one of the things I would do with 4-H is an embryology project where we would hatch eggs in the classroom. And I run into students now who say, Miss Hatley, I remember when I was in your classroom, we hatched eggs and we had baby chicks. And that's one thing that stuck with them and they remember.
Why do you think it's important for kids to know where their food comes from?
I think we're getting a little too dependent nowadays on convenience. Everything is instant and microwave and drive-through. A lot of times families don't sit down and eat a meal around the table anymore. It's grab something at a fast food restaurant. Most children think their food comes from a grocery store. I think we need to think about a little bit more about self-sustainability. I've had a school garden where we raised our own vegetables, and that was interesting that when we harvested them in the spring, we would fix a salad bar. And I had students that I had seen would never touch a vegetable in the cafeteria. But when we had that vegetable bar with the salad bar, that they would go back for thirds because they had that self-worth, that they knew they had grown it themselves. They would talk about how wonderful it was. I saw the importance and the need.
I recall reading or hearing somebody, actually a musician out of Montana, I guess it was, talking about what a great planet we live on. The food just grows right out of the ground.
Well, there's actually a song that I would sing with my students that was Dirt Made My Lunch. And we talked about how everything came from the dirt. And the kids, they would come up with things and they would say, well, I drink milk and that doesn't come from the dirt. I say, well, where does milk come from? And we talk about it comes from a cow. Well, what does the cow eat? Grass. Where does the grass grow? In the dirt. And everything, we could always bring it back to the dirt.
Of course, agriculture is a huge part of the North Carolina economy also.
Oh, absolutely. We're number one in sweet potatoes, and we're right up there with turkey production and peanuts, and it's our largest industry in the state of North Carolina. So that's another reason, the importance of our economy, that I think our children need to be educated on that.
I think it was Jefferson, too, wasn't it, who said something about the virtue of a rural lifestyle, the agricultural background of our...
You're exactly right. I used to take 8th graders to Washington, D.C. on field trips. We would always stop at Monticello on the way up and visit Jefferson's. And it was interesting to see how innovative he was with gardening and his inventions even back a couple of 100 years ago.
Did you incorporate music into your teaching?
Absolutely, absolutely. With the young students, that was a reward for them. They loved the instruments, so if we would have a good week, I would say, well, I'll bring the guitar, I'll bring the banjo in on Friday, and we would sing songs. And like I said, we did a play, and I actually had a chorus at one time that I did at the elementary school. We had a little choral group that I would use the guitar, and we would sing along, and I got them singing some harmonies.
I understand you made a trip to Atlanta at one point. Tell us about that, speaking of music and school and so on.
Oh, yes. Back in 2006, I was teaching elementary school, and our middle daughter was, I think, in 5th grade, and our nephew was in 4th grade, and they both played the banjo. And I heard that they were going to try to break a Guinness Book of World Records at Turner Field in Atlanta at the Braves game by having the largest ensemble of one single instrument. And you can guess, it was the banjo. So I grabbed my 94-year-old mama and my daughter and my nephew, and we went to Atlanta, and we got to make a giant V between first base, home plate, and third base. And we played Foggy Mountain Breakdown for 5 minutes. And supposedly at that time we did break the Guinness Book of World Record because there was like 260 banjos down there. But the highlight for me was Earl Scruggs was there, but he was up in a skybox, and they showed him on the big screen, but I wasn't close to him.
You need to tell us who Earl Scruggs is.
Okay, Earl Scruggs is a wonderful 3-string banjo player that was from Shelby, North Carolina in Cleveland County. He was the one that is credited with making the 3-finger style of banjo, which I just played, popular.
And he had something to do with Beverly Hillbillies theme song, didn't
That
he?
is correct. He first played with Bill Monroe, and then he split off with his partner Lester Flatt, and they performed Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, and they were sponsored by Martha White and had a TV program and were on the Grand Ole Opry. And from that, they went on to play Carnegie Hall. They went on to do the theme song for the Beverly Hillbillies TV show and actually appeared on that television show. And you can still pull it up on YouTube for this generation that doesn't know who he is. They could look him up. But he was there because he wrote Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And it's kind
he was
of
there
like
in Atlanta.
he was in Atlanta, and that's like the trademark song of all banjo players. If I can go somewhere and nobody knows anything about the banjo, they know Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And it was actually the theme song for the old original movie Bonnie and Clyde. And so anyway, in Atlanta, I didn't get to get close to him that night, but the next morning I went to the lobby to get a newspaper to see if they had covered the event. And there he was in the lobby, and I walked up and introduced myself, and I said, Mr. Scruggs, I was one of the banjo players on the field last night. And he goes, well, let me shake your hand. And I was like, no, let me shake yours. And I got to shake his hand, and we lost him in 2012, but I will always remember that.
What a great story. Well, Sandy, you've identified another song for us. You don't love God if you don't love your neighbors.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about it.
I believe that with all my heart. Matthew chapter 18 talks about we need to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Love God first and then our neighbor. And that's an important thing. And in this generation, I think we have gotten to road rage and to terrible mass shootings where people go in and take out their anger on people they don't even know or that they should be their friends. So I think we just need to love our neighbors and forgive one another over and over and over again. And I think we'd be a lot better place if we would.
And you've selected a version by Rhonda Vincent. Tell us just briefly about Rhonda Vincent.
Rhonda Vincent is a bluegrass performer. I identify with her because she's a lady in bluegrass just like I am, and she's made it big. She's from Missouri, and she travels all over the country in a big bus with her family and plays music. But she does this song, and she does a great job of it.
Let's hear it. You don't love God if you don't love your neighbor, by Rhonda Vincent.
And you don't love God.
That was Rhonda Vincent with You Don't Love God If You Don't Love Your Neighbor. Kind of a life theme for you, I gather, Sandy. Is that right?
Absolutely. Should be for everybody.
Our guest today, if you're just joining us, is Sandy Hatley. Sandy, female banjo player, former teacher, wife of Gary, and agricultural ambassador for the North Carolina Farm Bureau. Did I get that right?
That is correct.
Sandy, I'm interested in having you tell us a little bit about what it is about music that is good. Why have you made music such a big part of your life?
Well, I think music has a story for everybody. Mine happens to be bluegrass. Some people's it might be a different style, but music can really speak to you. I just know when I feel tired or distressed, I can put on music, and it just makes my whole day brighter and better. When I was in college, I would carry my banjo and keep it under my bed, and I would have girls come into my room, and they would say, oh, I just got out of the exam. Please play the banjo for me. And it was even Charles Schulz who wrote a little cartoon one time, and Linus was telling Charlie Brown, he said, I think every baby should be issued a banjo when they are born. And so I think it's a very happy instrument, and I think music really can help to enlighten you and bring joy into your life.
And it's certainly true, as we've seen, the studies, scientific studies have indicated that music has a very real impact on people's emotions and well-being.
There's even music therapists now that go out into the hospitals and work with people, and they found that music helps to, actually seems to help people to heal more rapidly.
Uh-huh.
It certainly, I think, gives them hope and a renewed spirit.
We actually talk about that here at the station from time to time. When we sort of back up and think about the big picture here, we're primarily a music station, and so we talk and think about music and what it is that we put out over the air for the kinds of reasons that you've mentioned. Tell us about this third song that you've selected. It is Well With My Soul.
It is probably my favorite hymn of all time. The words pretty much just sum up the way that I feel. I'm a woman of faith. Try not to worry. Just live each day as full as I possibly can. And I've always told my children, I said, whenever my time comes, make my funeral a celebration because I have been blessed beyond measure. And this song really pays tribute to that by saying it is well with my soul because things are well with me.
Can you say anything about the background of the song?
I do know a little bit about that background. It is amazing to me that the gentleman that wrote this song,
Horatio Spafford,
right, had gone through such tragedies, losing his family, and he was still able to sing praises, just like Job in the Bible, that no matter what comes, we still know that we have the Lord, we have the promise of life eternal, and that it is well with our soul.
I was actually thinking about it this morning in anticipation of our talking together today. It was C.S. Lewis who said, "You are a soul, you have a body." We so often think about the body in this life as being sort of all that there is, but it's really the other way around. You're a soul, and you have a body.
C.S. Lewis is my oldest daughter, Katie's favorite author. She loves his writings.
Well, Sandy, it's been a real treat having you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, it has definitely been a real treat for me to be here with you today. Thank you so much for inviting me to come.
Our pleasure. And actually, before we go to this last song, you mentioned to me before we came into the studio a special concert that you have coming up at the end of the month.
We do. My husband's family is the Hatley family. We have a concert coming up and would like to invite anybody and everybody to come out to it. We'll be a gospel sing.
It's the Hatley family band?
It is the Hatley family band. We will be singing at Cedar Grove Baptist Church. It's on Old 49, just south of Ashboro, and that will be on Sunday night, June the 30th at 6 p.m. So we'd love to have anybody come out and listen to some bluegrass gospel. And I promise you that you'll leave with a smile on your face and a skip in your step.
Very good. Well, thank you again, Sandy, for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Let's hear the song. An old hymn written by Horatio Spafford. It is Well With My Soul, and we're going to hear a bluegrass version by the Isaacs.
When peace like a